Everybody wants to come and make a deal, and we're working with a lot of different countries, and it's all going to work out very well. I think it's going to work out really very well. We think we're in very good shape. We think we're doing very well. Again, there'll be a transition cost and transition problems, but in the end, it's going to be a beautiful thing.
President Trump there saying he thinks it is going to work out, but he was asked if he's been in touch with President Xi of China, because of course now the cumulative tariffs on China are at 145%. He wouldn't answer. He just said he thinks it is going to work out. But that was a long cabinet meeting, and there are many things certainly to fact check here.
Yeah, a lot of adulation and praise from cabinet members for the president. A lot to fact check as well. Let's go straight to the White House with CNN's Jeff Zeleny. We also have with us senior reporter Daniel Dale and Richard Quest, who has been closely watching markets. And Jeff, on that point, the president was asked what he makes of the fact that the stock market has trended downward since yesterday's enormous gains following his announcement of this 90-day pause on most tariffs. The president there is saying that he hasn't been watching the market today.
So today the president is not watching the market. Yesterday, of course, we know he was watching the market. Look, the president in the cabinet room there is just steps away from the Oval Office. He, of course, has the full battery of aides around him and information at his fingertips. He was having a long cabinet meeting by design. This is something that was on the agenda today, so the president can be meeting with his advisors, but so he perhaps would not have to be watching the market bit by bit, but he's very aware of what is going on in the market. There is no doubt about that. But the reality here is we can always put to bed the question, is the president watching the market? Yes, he is. The bond market as well. But I thought the Treasury Secretary, when he was asked that direct question about the market today, his response was quite interesting. Let's watch.
As we go through the queue and settle with these countries who are going to bring us their best offers, we will end up in a place of great certainty over the next 90 days on tariffs. We had very good inflation numbers today. Oil's down. We had a successful bond market, so I don't see anything unusual today.
He doesn't see anything unusual. There will be uncertainty, or there will be certainty, in 90 days. Of course, there's uncertainty right now. But look, the Trump administration is trying to put a good light on the fact that the market is once again responding to the trade war that is at hand. Never mind the one that has been set aside, but the reality here is that the U.S. and China are on the brink of a very significant and serious trade war. So that is what the market is doing. But by and large, otherwise in the cabinet meeting, we did see Elon Musk literally sitting at the table there. It's the first time we have seen him in public, of course, since all this ended. We know very clear what side he was on in this whole discussion over trade. He thought that the Peter Navarro side of things pushing for sweeping tariffs was wrong. So Elon Musk clearly back at the table here, but otherwise it clearly was a moment for the president to be built up a bit, if you will, pumped up a bit by his staff by saying how great things are, even as we know there are many challenges afoot in the markets and otherwise.
Yeah, he was getting a lot of love, which perhaps he was needing today. Jeff Zeleny, thank you so much. Let's scoot on over to Daniel Dale, our resident fact checker. And there's a lot to fact check here. Maybe hard to do it all. I'll let you take it away. I did just want to mention one thing, which was RFK Jr. talking about the measles outbreak, because he seemed to say, hey, we're doing such a great job in the U.S. Look at Europe. There are so many more people who are sick with measles, who have died from measles. We just need to be clear. That is an issue that is being driven by measles illness in Romania and Kazakhstan, which obviously do not have as good of healthcare systems as the U.S. When you look at the places in Europe that do, some places are doing better than the U.S. I just wanted to put that one out there. Daniel, what did you see?
Thank you. So I'll try to stick mostly to the big news of the day, which is on tariffs, trade, and foreign affairs. President Trump keeps saying that the U.S. has a $1 trillion trade deficit with China. That's about quadruple the actual figure, which was $263 billion last year. If you only count trade in goods and don't count trade in services, it's about $295 billion, so still nowhere close. President Trump also said again that during his first term, we took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China through his tariffs. As many of our colleagues keep pointing out, because we have to, All that revenue was paid by U.S. importers, and we know from study after study and just from talking to people in this country, most of those costs were passed on to U.S. consumers. He also repeated, Brianna, a bit of alternative history he keeps using, saying that the European Union was formed for the purpose of taking advantage of the United States. I spoke this week to an expert on European integration. He said not only is that wrong, it is completely detached from the actual history. European integration has long happened with the firm support of U.S. administrations from both parties. And he said that, talking about Japan, we defend them and spend billions of dollars. They don't pay anything. In fact, Japan does share the costs of the U.S. military presence in that country, paying billions of dollars per year. I want to briefly move on to two other subjects. He spoke again about autism and keeps kind of flirting with this debunk conspiracy theory that childhood vaccines cause autism, saying that something artificial had to have caused the increase in diagnoses over recent decades, and said maybe it's a shot. That is debunked. It is not a shot. Experts tend to attribute this increase in diagnosis to increase awareness, increase screening. There may be some environmental factors, but it's not childhood vaccines. And he again repeated near the end there, he returned to this old favorite that other countries around the world emptying jails and mental institutions under President Biden to somehow send criminals and people with mental health issues to the United States as migrants. I have begged and pleaded with Trump's team for any evidence, any corroboration of those claims. They haven't provided any submission of it whatsoever.
Daniel Dale, thank you so much for walking us through that. Over to Richard Quest. Richard, as you well know, and as we've seen in recent days, markets react very sensitively to what the administration says, the sort of plans that they project outward. How do you think markets are going to respond, or are responding, doesn't look great, to what we just heard from the White House?
Yeah, well, I feel sorry for Daniel because there was so much in that news conference. I prefer the old journalist's joke, why let the facts get in the way of a good story, which, if you know what I mean. Because there was just too much there that was either half-truth, partial truth, not even on the reservation of truth or reality to actually dissect. So we have to look at the markets and ask, what are they seeing? What are they reacting to? And we can put it into two buckets. The first one is the tariffs that are already now in place and in force. The 145% on China, the 10% general, the autos, the steels, and the farmers to come. That's the number that's baked into the economy at the moment. The next bit that they're reacting to is this 90-day process that you heard Scott Bessent talk about, of countries bringing to the table their best offer. And this, to a large extent, is the most optimistic part about it, because this is the part, if the administration gets right, they will rebalance trade in the US favor, which is what needs to be done. So that is a tempering, if you will, on the market. But the worry overall is that it's not going to happen, and that somehow it's going to fall apart and we'll be back to the high tariffs that we were going to see last week.
And we're still facing high tariffs right now. I think that's what we need to remind people of, Richard. Like, at this moment in time, the U.S. has this protectionist posture, the likes of which, even without going to, what was it, nuclear winter, I think is what Bill Ackman described it as, or something similar to that. Even without going to that, this is really unprecedented, this moment we're at with these 10% tariffs and all the other ones. And the market knows that.
Yes, I mean, depending on your definition, and there are several out there, the general tariff rate of the United States is the highest that it's been since about 1904. So we've never had 1904 to 1918. We've never had this level of tariff from the US in recent memory. And that's what you're seeing baked into the number. The 10%, I keep banging on about this, the 10% general tariff, the low floor, the floor, if you will, that the president announced yesterday, is 3 times higher than the previous average. The US average tariff against the world was 2.5% until yesterday. Now it is 10%. That is 3 times as much. If you add in China, which is 14% of imports, and by the way, you know, you want to talk about a level of amateurishness. Yesterday, the president said it was 125%. Today, the White House has to clarify it's actually 145%. You know that, again, that old joke, a dollar here and a dollar there, and pretty soon you're talking real money. The reality is the markets are confused. They are worried. They do not know how to model what is happening. And any way they do model, growth is lower and inflation is higher.
Richard Quest, always appreciate the analysis. Thank you so much.